Welcome everyone. We're pleased to see all of you here. Welcome to Techolution's application modernization webinar, Blueprint for Banking. We have Tim Delicio, CTO at Techolution, and Craig Moristro, our guest speaker, banking and financial expert. This webinar is being recorded. You can ask your questions and chat with us on this application. We will be taking up all the questions after the session is done. Tim and Craig, please take it up.
Thank you, Asta. So as Asta said, I'm the CTO here at Techolution, and I'm in charge of the next-gen transformations here. I've started my career professionally in 1998, so I've been doing this a good amount of time, and I'm in charge of our cloud practice here. So, Craig, want to introduce yourself?
Sure, and I'm not going to tell you when I started. Let's just say this. I've been in the financial services industry for over 3 decades. Basically, I'm very excited to get an opportunity to present here, discuss, and to share my experiences, especially in transforming technology from legacy architectures to these new digital architectures. My career is very simple. In the last 2 decades, I've had the privilege and the honor to run many of the transformation initiatives for one of the largest money centers in the globe. And from that experience, I've been able to gain a lot of insights and a lot of challenges associated with doing these types of transformations. The reason why I'm here is because at my firm, I was part of the management team, and I brought in Tim and Techolution to basically help us with our transformation. It was a very successful partnership. We were very successful in our transformation, and Tim had reached out to me and said, Craig, would you be interested in participating in a webinar and kind of sharing our experiences in this transformation? And I said, sure, I'd be more than happy to do that. Obviously, I'm a financial services guy by heart. Anything I could do to help fellow financial services companies in this transformation, I'm all for it.
Cool.
So Tim, why don't you kind of go through what this webinar is about today?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. So first, I'm going to give you a quick overview of Techolution and some of its unique capabilities, where we're focused on in the industry and what we're actually looking to do. And then Craig is going to discuss the current trends in financial services, as well as elaborate some of the technical debt and how it is a major blocker in some of the traditional banking. Then I'm going to walk through a modern digital architecture, which is, highlight some of the tools that we use and how it all fits together. And then finally, Craig is going to talk about the 2 major transformation strategies and how they're used in the industry and the benefits and challenges of each. And then we'll open it for questions at the end. So hope you guys are ready. Let's get started here. So you probably haven't really heard much about us. We're pretty new on the block here. We've been around for about 5 years doing digital transformations, working with some of the biggest enterprises in the world. We really focus on a lot of the cutting edge technologies and technology practices to provide real transformations and bring value right away. If we can't get in there and help you move in right away, then we failed here. So we are small enough to care about your business, but big enough to scale out and bring it up what you need at a global scale. In fact, that is the foundation of how the company was actually formed. We were born on the industry, in the enterprise. I was on the other side of the coin, hiring technology and consulting firms to come in. So I know what you guys go through and what it's like. So it's kind of interesting to be on the other side now. We've partnered with a lot of the big, top technology firms in the world. We do a lot of work with Google Anthos, Microsoft AI, and really focus on bringing value through those technologies. And then finally, I don't know if you heard us kind of talk in the beginning here, but we are headquarters in New York City. And I am quite excited to get back there. I do miss the commute. It's interesting being in a full work from home and not seeing people anymore. But one day I'll go back there, and then hopefully soon. And we have offices in APAC and India and Africa as well. So we're kind of spread out around the world here. So just give you some information about our core competencies. So we have 4 major areas that we focus on. The cloud practice, which is my practice, this is what I run. We build, implement, and we support next-gen platforms. We focus really on application modernization through containerization, and serverless technologies with really a focus on hybrid and multi-cloud. So not only do we deploy things into the cloud, we can leverage your existing data centers as well as multiple clouds at once. So a lot of cool technologies there. We have a wow digital experience, which helps our customers build data-driven user experiences that can really meant to wow their customers and help increase conversion rate on those systems. We have an IoT practice, which is really building and deploying services and devices at the edge to collect and aggregate data, and then help ship this data back to the cloud for processing. And then finally, our AI, which is, it's really tough to do IoT without AI to make sense of all that data. But we utilize advanced analytics and data science to drive valuable insights for better decision making at the industry. So now that you know about us, let's talk a little about the current banking trends. Hand it over to you, Craig.
Thanks, Tim. So let's talk about banking transformation. Why are the banks having to transform to these new digital architectures? I'm going to, like I said, most of the presentation I'm going to be giving you is from the perspective of us being in a money center, being in a management team, and having to present to the business, because obviously they're the ones funding all these initiatives. So the big question, whenever that question comes up, why do we need to transform? It comes down to one word and one word only, and that word is survival. There has been some massive changes in the financial services industry. And the big one that's come into the financial industry is the introduction of fintechs. And what I mean by fintechs, for all of you people that are in the financial services industry, you know exactly what this is, but I'll just give you the definition that we're using, at least in the money centers for this. What a fintech really is a highly skilled technology company that has the latest technology and compute capabilities. And what they're doing is they're bringing products and services to the financial services industry at a high velocity pace, at a pace much faster than traditional financial services organizations can handle. These fintechs are bringing in artificial intelligence, they're bringing in real-time data analytics, and they're forcing the financial services companies to make some major changes in their technology infrastructures. One of the biggest challenges facing, and this is really the biggest trend in the financial services industry, is technical debt within traditional financial services companies has soared over the last decade. And these large monolithic internal compute environments, they're just too expensive, and they're unable to support the newer technologies. And as a result from that, they're putting a very large drag on financial budgets. But the biggest thing, if I would say, that's impacted the financial services industry, and you're going to hear me mention this a lot over the next day, and that is this ability, and like I said, the fintechs are taking great advantage of this, and that is the ability to grab data in real time and drive real-time data analytics to make their decision making. It's making their ability to make decisions and to, like I said earlier, to move products and services into the environment at a lightning pace compared to what traditional banking is doing. So let's move on and let's talk a little bit about technical debt. So the big question I get when I go to the business and I ask them, well, we've got this big technical debt issue, and that's one of the big reasons we're running traditional bank transformation initiatives for banking. The big question I get from the business is, number one, how did we get it? And number two, why do we need to get rid of it? So let's talk about how technical debt got created in these companies. And by the way, this is not just for the financial services industry. Every single firm that has a big technology infrastructure has the same problem, and it was created the same way. And what it was a if you can say, a perfect storm in technology. And what that perfect storm was simply was this. You have hardware that used to be crazy expensive, over the last decade has dropped in price considerably. And when I'm talking hardware, I'm talking servers, I'm talking switches, I'm talking routers, I'm talking every piece of technology that exists in the data center. All of those prices on all of that hardware has obviously reduced. In the old days, hardware was at least 30 to 40% of your implementation budget. Now it's a fraction of it. Obviously, the resourcing and manpower is really where the bulk of the money is in doing any kind of implementation nowadays. The second thing that changed the industry considerably is the introduction of tremendous amount of software. Once again, in the old days, software was really expensive. Nowadays, it's endless. Probably the best equation I can give to you, I'm an investment management, a lot of my expertise is investment management. I would say it would correlate back to, let's talk about mutual funds. In the investment business, remember, there were more stocks and you only had a handful of mutual funds in the beginning of when this industry started. Now you have 100 times more mutual funds than you have even listed stocks. It's the same kind of story. What's happening in the technology field is there's just endless amount of software. And then the third thing, which I think is probably the most impactful, and that was the introduction of a large pool of highly talented technologists offshoring, specifically from India. So when you take low cost in the hardware, combined with low cost in software, combined with low cost in resources, like any other company, financial services companies are most guilty of this. They built out these massive infrastructures and they put the idea of migrating these in the future on the back burner. The unfortunate thing that happened in the industry is these legacy infrastructures, these massive, remember, we just kept building and building and building all these applications in our environments. And unfortunately, we expect the technology to bail us out. The unfortunate thing is, and this is the explanation we have to give to our business, is most of the new technologies, the new compute environments, the new cloud environments, these new, ML/AI stuff is really unsupported in traditional architectures. And really a lot of this technology is extremely difficult to migrate to a microservice or to a real-time data ingestion or real-time advanced data analytics capability. So why is technical debt, if you can go back, please? So why this is so difficult is this: why you need to get rid of your technical debt? It's very simple. You can't bring products and services to the market fast enough. And the reason why that is because the fintechs have the advantage on this. The second thing is you're unable to take advantage of the inexpensive, scalable, resilient, and believe it or not, I know this is hard for a lot of people to understand from a financial services. Believe it or not, cloud computing is more secure. It all depends how it's engineered. And then you have current infrastructure costs draining out your critical funding and your resources. And then, of course, once again, the inability of you're using your current infrastructure to basically run and support real-time data ingestion or advanced analytics. So, Tim, why don't you walk everyone through, when we say new digital architecture, walk through what we're talking about, the capabilities of these new platforms. And I think once Tim has an ability to explain this to everyone, I think you'll understand what the competitive advantage is. So go ahead, Tim.
So this is an example of what a real-time digital architecture could look like. This is an event streaming, event sourcing type architecture. And really, this could be anything. So I tried to pick something that everybody could relate to, even outside the BFSI world. We want to make sure everybody has a credit card. I'm sure everybody at one time has tried to cancel that credit card. So I was just walking through a flow of what this could look like. But really, this could be any change in record at all. Anything that goes back and has to be updated in some typically legacy mainframe or some system in the way back in the network. So there really are two main advantages of this architecture style, and that is a decoupled approach and a data at the edge. So with a decoupled approach, you can make changes to each of these small services instead of making a change to the entire application, which really accelerates your time to market. So imagine, we had one of our clients was doing quarterly releases. So they had this rat's nest of code that was all intertwined, and they had to do these complex matrices to try to figure out what systems were dependent on this, and if they changed that system, how does that work? What does that connect to? And what that equated to was basically quarterly releases. Everybody releases at the same time, and if you don't make that date, you're screwed. You can't even get your code changed out there. I mean, just to think how agile or not agile that actually is. You get 4 changes a year. If you don't make that date, boom, you missed it. By switching to this architecture style, they were actually able to go down to 2 weeks. So every other week they were doing a release. I mean, just imagine that change in market conditions and changes that you need to push out right away. I mean, that's an amazing ability to really deliver. It also gives you a more resiliency, because each one of these systems is operating independently. So if you lose one service, your system is still going to operate. You're not going to bring down the entire application stack. So that gives you a lot of advantages to being able to scale systems up and scale at the level you need to. I mean, why do you need to throw all this excessive hardware at something that's barely even used? I mean, just scale what you really need and what's important to the business. And then
So yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Tim. Yeah, I would just like to add on the emphasis on this. Just think about the velocity. If you're able to reduce your release cycles, once again, Tim was talking about from quarter releases down to every few weeks releases. I've seen where we've implemented this, we actually can get into multiple incremental. They're small releases, don't get me wrong, but they can be done multiple in 1 week. Think about the speed in which you're able to bring products to market or new features or capabilities to your customers. This is revolutionizing the way that not only the way that the financial services industry is operating, but really what the expectation of our customers are going to be expecting in the future. And all of this, and Tim's going to get to this, all of this only exists through one thing only, and that is the real-time components of this as well as the automation. But go ahead, Tim.
So, and then the second advantage was just the data at the edge. Being able to bring that data closer to your end users. I mean, why do you need to traverse your entire network topography just to get access to some data? I mean, it creates so much dependencies and so much risk there. Might as well move it to the user and let them move at the speed that they're working. So just quickly, just to walk through some of this, when a user goes in and interacts with the user interface or the web app or whatever system, that's going to fire an event that actually gets fed into the system. And this is a publisher and subscriber based model. So multiple people or multiple systems can publish in. So it could not necessarily be a third party or some other integration that you want to expose that endpoint to actually collect events from. And at the end of that, the output is actually an event that somebody else is listening to. So this could be, one, it could be multiple. So in this example, a system would then grab that credit card cancellation request and then go and update the system of record. But at the same time, you could also have another system that acts completely independent that would pick it up and email the user, let them know. And then the real cool thing about this is you can then start to listen to your messages that are going on and get valuable insight from your business. What systems are being used, how are they interacting, which systems aren't used at all. Those are the things that you could actually decommission. I mean, and then this all leads to basically event streaming and creating a massive ecosystem of just events flowing through your entire ecosystem.
Yep. And one thing I would mention, just one last closing thing on that, it's okay to move on there, Tim, is your event streaming strategy, how you set up your streams is in itself its own strategy. And that is really where the capabilities of these new modern digital architectures really take a big advancement. And once again, there's companies such as Techolution and firms that are specialized in these event streaming strategies that know how to set up, segregate, and segment your event streaming, your streaming strategy to be able to really drive real-time analytics. But go ahead, Tim.
So let's say that you actually do want to build that system. So how do you do it in such a way where you don't compromise on quality and security? Because if you put this in place and open up the keys of the kingdom to people to just let them deploy services what they want and interact, how do you make sure you keep your governance on them? How do you make sure that everything's secure? And really the key to that is one word, and that's really automation. Microservices are definitely a buzzword. Everyone wants to do it. But what they don't tell you is microservice development is actually pretty hard to do. I mean, it's not like you can just pick up from your typical approach and just run with it. There's a lot of things that go on that really impact what a microservice development environment looks like that sometimes you don't even know about. And if you don't do it right, you're going to create a worse situation than when you even started. So what we do to kind of combat some of that is we introduce automation, and in this particular example, showcasing some of our CI/CD. So if you're not familiar with the CI/CD, it's continuous integration and continuous deployment. So with CI, continuous integration, the main goal is to take your source code, build it, and then test it, and then run some kind of analysis of it. And at the end of it, have some sort of deployable artifact that you can then push out. whether that be form of a Docker image or a container or a serverless function, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But at the end, you have a deployable artifact. And then CD is your continuous deployment, is a way to take this deployable artifact and get it pushed out to your system, whether that be your qual system or your production system. And we want to make sure that there are certain checks and balances along the way. And we'll go into that in a second on the automation piece. So we really sum this up in one word, and that's automation.
And just to add in on that, automation is the reason, the biggest serious challenge to any development team that's been trained in it. For example, Techolution are specialists in the building of microservices and obviously this type of automation. For you to go in at a financial services company to take a traditional development team and teach them this level of automation is extremely difficult and extremely time consuming. And it's probably the single biggest reasons and failures that I've seen is the expectation of trying to push this level of automation. You can't shortchange this. It is absolutely a pinnacle component to supporting a new digital architecture. And you have to make sure that your team is properly trained up to do it, or you have to outsource that and get that properly taken care of. Otherwise, the rest of the architecture really means nothing. So go ahead, Tim.
So this is a little bit more generic, but I wanted to highlight some of the things that actually goes on in your automation pipelines and what is kind of the secret sauce to how this all works and how it all functions. Probably the most important thing, the area that we should really start on first when you go down this path, is make sure your testing is in place. When you go down to the microservice level and start getting these smaller units of work that are all decoupled and running by themselves, if you do not have a way to test them and to trust what you're actually producing is the end result, it's going to be a big failure. So, test-driven development and unit testing and code coverage is extremely important. And that's where our automation journey starts. But even after you do that, the next kind of layer you start to add on top of that is you need some sort of automated feature testing. When you take all these different units and combine them, what does this actually look like? How does this actually connect? How does this actually function? Team A delivers something that Team B is using. How do you make sure it all works? So you need to make sure you have some sort of automated feature testing. And an important aspect of that too is your static code analysis. So making sure that you have some automation that is constantly scanning your code, making sure that it adheres to best practices within your industry, making sure that developers are all coding the same and having the same format, making sure that there's security protocols going on, scanning that code, making sure that you're not breaking any OWASP, problems or injecting into any security vulnerabilities. Then you also have automated artifact building. So once you have that code compiled and released, where are you going to store it? And then you need to have some kind of security bot that will actually scan that image to make sure somebody didn't maliciously put something in there. And then finally, the last aspect of it is just notifications. You need to have your developers notified when something fails, something they need to look at, or even when something succeeds and ready to be tested.
Yeah, just to reiterate this point with what Tim's saying here is remember, you go through a lot of time building these highly secure digital architectures. And let's say you get in there and you're releasing a velocity of code, which is the design of these things. You're releasing code constantly. If you don't have a highly developed governance model into place, all it does is take one release to open up the exposure from a security perspective on your environment. And once again, once the door is open and the more releases you do, if that's not fixed, all of a sudden you create a very vulnerable environment. And obviously that's unacceptable in the financial services world we live today, especially with the fact that, let's face it, financial services companies are probably the biggest target for cyber attacks of outside the government. Probably there is. So once again, this piece that Tim's talking about here, this software engineering governance is extremely important, especially for financial services delivery.
And just to touch on a little bit more of the security, it's important to have things like hardened golden base images that you're actually extending from. Every software, I don't care what language you use, uses some form of frameworks. You need to make sure your frameworks are up to date and are constantly approved and scanned to make sure there's no vulnerabilities there. The constant scanning of pre-built artifact and images, that needs to constantly occur. You need to have your code statically scanned as well, whether it be during release time or just on an ongoing basis, looking for vulnerabilities that get reported back to developers directly in their integration environments where they're developing, and making sure to block when things aren't going. If you have a high vulnerability or a critical vulnerability, you cannot let that code get to production. And then finally, having some form of either canary or gated production rollouts. I highly recommend doing canary rollouts, releasing your code to a subset of your population to make sure that it meets your, KPIs and your business requirements. And then if it's a success, roll it out to the rest of the organization. And that works well with tools like Spinnaker.
Yeah, so what Tim's really talking about is building just an ecosystem of development and a highly matured ecosystem. And unfortunately, this is the world we're dealing in today. Without these advanced mature ecosystems, let's face it, all the fintechs have this capabilities in house. Be right here to tell you that traditional firms are trying to move towards that.
So let me just give you a sample here, and I don't want to scare you here, but this is some of the next gen technologies that I'm talking about here. And I tried to break them down into different categories, but even that was hard to do. A lot of these things overlap, and just think about it. Even just your development code is probably one small box in this app dev box. And that is all the code that runs your system. That doesn't even account to all these other systems that interact with, whether it be on the data side, the automation, infrastructure automation side, the security side. Look how many buckets there are here. There's a lot. Logging, code coverage. You really need to be an expert in all of these technologies, as well as understand what the best practices are for them. And it's extremely difficult as for an organization to not only keep the lights on with their day-to-day operations, but also to go back and learn all of these technologies. And this is really where we've added a lot of expertise into. We've become experts in these. We're not an expert in your business and in what you're trying to do. We're an expert in the technology and how to help you transform. Unfortunately, I think a lot of organizations do try to do this themselves and realize it's a lot more than they can actually bite off. So it's why I highly recommend you find a technology partner that can help fit your skills and fill in the gaps and it knows the best practices to help accelerate your transformations.
I don't think I have anything to add on to that. All I can tell you is it's a lot of.
You did a good job then.
Exactly. So let's talk about transformations. Now we're back to me again. So obviously transformation strategies. Let's talk about this. All companies, I've been running transformation programs for a long time. And unfortunately, we're still seeing companies that are using the old traditional approach to transformation. And I'd like to kind of go through what the basics of those are and kind of why the traditional approach really is not the optimal way to move in today's world. And that is, so in a traditional transformation approach, for those of you that have ever done this before, in the old days, what we used to do is we take a big inventory of all of our technology. And then what we would do is we come up with a process in which we meet with our customers and the business, then come up with some prioritization of what's kept and what's not. So we come up with a decom list, which for those of you who are laughing, anyone's ever done this, or data rationalization program or any kind of application rationalization program, because anytime you ask the business or you ask technology whether their application is important, the invariable answer you always get back is yes, our application is important. So once again, doesn't usually work well asking the customers on whether these things are really real or not. Once again, we'll get into this later. That's why advanced analytics and data-driven decision-making is so important. But anyway, so what you do is you take the existing portfolio of all your technology, you come up with some kind of assessment process or matrix that determines how easily that stuff can be moved over to the cloud. The new compute capabilities are moved to microservices, cloud computing, or even potentially event streaming. Then you come up with a standardized process, and it's like a sausage machine. You basically push everything through the transformation process, and then out the other end, you get a nice transformed environment, and that's how you pitch it. That's how you present it to your senior management. You come up with a schedule, and there's a lot of enthusiasm around it in the very beginning, and then you start executing. And normally what you execute is the easy stuff first, and with the medium stuff next, and then you dabble in the hard stuff. And eventually, sometime during that life cycle, once you spend enough money and spend enough time, usually they declare victory and walk away and say, yes, it was fantastic. Here's the problem. I've done this for a long time, and one of the first things that happens when we go into these due diligence meetings, especially if the business is there, what you find out is, first of all, this type of approach is extremely time consuming. The second thing you figure out once you've done this is that it's crazy expensive. The third thing you figure out when you're there is that it's been also a massive disruption to your organization. And the reason why it's a massive disruption is you have to look at the stuff that Tim presented in the previous slides. Not only do you have to remember, I've never met a technology team or a business team in financial services that is underutilized. They're all running usually at 80% or up on utilization. If you go in and do a transformation initiative, they have to learn all that technology that I saw that Tim showed you. They've got to learn those skill sets. They've got to add that in on top of their current responsibilities, and God help them if you're doing DevOps. So not only the guys building the applications, supporting the applications, but now they have to learn new technology, and then they have to learn these new processes. If you don't have a mature CI/CD, which is what Tim was talking about earlier, you're in big trouble. And the biggest thing you're going to be missing is automation. You don't create automation, it's just terrible. The next thing, but this is the one that really bothers me, and this is the thing that, boy, the business just will tear you apart, is in the end, if you really want to be completely candid, this is probably the most wasteful process. And let me explain to you why. You're migrating, you have to show progress in these types of programs, which means you're going to migrate the easy stuff as quickly as possible. The problem is the easy stuff that isn't necessarily strategic. And if you move anything in this process that's non-strategic, you just created waste, which means you created new technical debt, and you're going to be having to deal with the problem in the future. So, like I said before, this is not the ideal process to go through new transformation. It's just not. It's a new world, and you have to use a different one. So, Tim, if we can, let's talk about the leapfrog. So this is where most companies are going. And they call it the leapfrog transformation process. And they kind of took it from General MacArthur from World War II. For those of you familiar with General MacArthur during World War II, he came up with an innovative approach in the Pacific War called leapfrog, which was he would go around non-strategic islands and only focus on strategic islands, and then in the hopes of winning the war at a more quick place. That basically is the same idea here. What a leapfrog transformation process is simply this. You go out and immediately build a new advanced analytics platform. You can get these platforms built. You can hire a firm that specializes in this, like Techolution, for example, that has this expertise. They can build these environments in months at a fraction of the cost it would take you to even think about building something internally. And they can build these platforms that are going to give you the capability to do real-time data ingestion. They're going to build in the Confluent event streaming capability that you have there. They're going to be able to tie into it at advanced visualization. And then obviously you have a platform now to bring products and services to your customers at an alarming pace immediately as soon as these environments are built. The second big thing about this is now you have a platform that you can also start implementing machine learning and AI in a relatively fast pace. It depends obviously on your data. And then obviously one of the great things about having this new platform is you only integrate critical data from your legacy monolithic infrastructure. Once again, you're not moving stuff, you're just integrating to the stuff in the back end. What's great about these new advanced analytics platforms is they do two big things for you. One, they give you the ability to bring products and services quickly, but most importantly, they're going to give you the necessary data analytics to make data-driven decisions. And those data-driven decisions are going to become extremely valuable to you when you look at your monolithic infrastructures. The new strategy is to decom your old environment, not migrate it. And the new strategy is to build new stuff on your new platform at all possibilities, and only refactor a small set of your applications, strategic applications, to your environment, to your new environment. This is critical. How do you make the decision on what's strategic and what's not strategic? You use data analytics, and you use, more importantly, data-driven decisioning. That was the stuff that, if you talked to Tim earlier, that's what he alluded to. So this is very important. That's the reason why this strategy is the one that most of the major firms are going with right now. And this is definitely if you want to be a CIO and you want to make the business happy, this is the fastest and most expedited way to do this. Now let me just fill you in. Like I said, I'll just go over some real high points on this once again. Once again, the new strategy is to build the analytics platform, decom versus migrate, buy versus build, only refactor what you really need. Obviously, get into ML and AI as quickly as possible, use empirical decision making. All that stuff I have already talked about. Let me share with you my last implementation I did of one of these. So, and I think this closes my component of the presentation. When I asked my CIO, once this was done, we did the usual thing. We had a party afterwards, and everyone acknowledged success and all that kind of great stuff. And he had his new analytics platform sitting up there. He was servicing his customers, getting good positive feedback from the business. And I went up to him and I asked him, I said, wow, this is quite a success. And he said it really was. And I said, it's because of all this data analytics and all that stuff. He goes, yes, but that's not the real reason this was a success. And I looked at him and I said, okay, well, tell me the real reason. He said, Craig, because I have 1,800 applications, of which 800 are basically externally hosted. So now I'm down to 1,600 applications. 800 were externally hosted. I'm down to 800 applications. I had 800 applications I had to migrate to these new modern technologies. By using the leapfrog strategy and implementing this platform, and by using an external vendor such as Techolution to come in and build this platform, I was able to run advanced data analytics. In the end, I only have to migrate 80 strategic applications. He said, that's the victory. He goes, I don't have to migrate 800, I have to migrate 80. And I can easily hire a specialized firm, such as Techolution, or any firm that specializes in microservices, and I can get those applications migrated over within the budgets I have, but more importantly, without disrupting my organization. And we'll work on the transition plan for a technologist during that time period. So that's something for people to think about. So Tim, why don't you talk about some of your clients that you've done this for?
Yeah, so thanks, Craig. So we really have done this in a wide range of different verticals and different clients. We've really focused on being transformational, doing event streaming, automation platforms. We've done greenfield builds. So we like to take a cloud-first approach to this and really try to help drive transformation. So I just wanted to showcase some of the fact that we haven't just done financial services. We've helped lead a lot of these changes in a lot of organizations around the world. So, I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you all. I hope to work with everybody in the future. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Asta and see if there's any questions.
Yes, hi. We have 3 questions that came with the registration. What percentage of application normally requires refactoring from your experience?
Okay, so from my experience from a technology perspective, usually it's between around 20 to 25% at max. I know that sounds kind of startling to a lot of people, but believe it or not, once you run advanced analytics, you're going to find that 75% of your applications, either one, there is a new vendor application that provides the same capability that's already native, so you can decom that, or that the existing applications need to be decomped. They're basically no longer needed, and the justification that the business owner as well as the technology owner, when looked at from a data-driven decision, basically found out that the value of those applications are nowhere near as valuable as they think they
All right. Why did you guys go to specialized forms for converting your application to microservices?
are. Okay. I'll take that, Tim. The reason why we did it was really quite simple. if you looked at what Tim mentioned, um, automation, automation, automation. That was basically the big reason. Here's the problem you have when you work for the learning curve of these new technologies is very difficult. And if you spend a lot of time on it, yes, they can learn that. But the automation component of learning all of this is the difference. Think about this. For you to build an ecosystem and bring products to market very quickly, you have to get 80% of your code fully automated. And then you have to make sure that on when you do test-driven development, you also have to have the ability to from those test scripts to go in and build further automation from it. So unless you're an automation expert, and that is only automation in your development, but automation in your scalability, automation in your resiliency, and automation in your security, unless all those are automated, it's very difficult to run these type of environments. And that's the reason why we went to specialized firms that know how to do this. To build an advanced analytics platform, I said, Tim can build it in months. He did at a fraction of the cost. When we looked at it internally to train up our staffs and do that, the cost was almost 2 to 3 times what it would have cost by just going with a specialized firm.
What are your thoughts on staff augmentation?
I'm not a big fan of it, not in this type of development. And let me explain to you why. The problem you have with staff augmentation and these type of implementations is one nice thing about going to a specialized firm, they're owning the deliverable, which means that they have experience in doing this. They're using all of their automation that they've created, as I mentioned before, and you have a full accountability on the deliverable. And a lot of this work, as I said before, is not easy work, and a lot of the new technologies are pretty difficult to understand. When we bring in staff augmentation to try to solve these problems, what we found out is we had experts in little bits and pieces. But remember, what we were looking for from the staff augmentee teams were to provide us direction. Well, the unfortunate thing is almost every consultant has a different direction. And in the end, I think it's sacrificed on delivery. And I can tell you this from experience, bringing in staff augmentation did not shorten the implementation times by that much. The only thing that shortened the implementation times significantly was to bring in a specialized firm.
All right. What is an ideal first application to select for modernization, assuming my client knows nothing about it?
Tim, you want to, how do I decide which application's the best to move? Is that the question?
It's the ideal first application. The first application is honestly one that is not your most complicated. You want to make sure you definitely have a win under your belt. You understand the architecture. You understand, the different flows of it. Ideally, it's something that doesn't have a lot of dependencies. Get some good wins, and then from there you start ramping up. But the first one should be something that is definitely attainable. Now the second one is really, I think, the harder one to select, because that's the one that's really going to start driving value and be very strategic.
But I would like to stop that just for a second. I agree with everything that Tim said once you get in the selection, but you got to build the platform first.
Yeah.
And I can't stress that enough. Going into your old environment and taking an application and migrating that to microservices and putting it onto the cloud. Okay, that's fine. But that is not going to bring value to your business. A platform is going to bring value to your business. You're better off investing in a platform that supports real-time data ingestion and real-time event streaming and integrating with your legacy systems than you are running one simple application migrating to the cloud. in my experience.
All right. Have you found setting up data science, big data platforms different from traditional software platforms? What major challenges have you faced?
I mean, I can answer that one, Tim.
I
So
can answer
yes,
too.
let's tag team on this then. Let me share it from my perspective. And once again, I keep coming back to the same thing. If you have a digital platform, advanced analytics platform, and you're getting real-time data ingestion, data science becomes very relatively easy because you're pulling in real-time data sets. In data science, in its best terms, is looking at your current distribution of your data sets and coming up with a use case that you want to solve, the problem that you're wanting to solve, and finding whether or not that data supports how to solve that problem. And if it doesn't, what data science really is to people is the creation of new data sets from existing data sets to solve use cases. That's really what data science is. That's a skill set. But once again, if you don't have the platform and you don't have the data ingestion, real-time data ingestion, you don't have a good event streaming strategy to feed this, because remember, you're going to have a lot of different data streams coming in to do this. If you don't have those fundamental pieces in place, it's pretty hard to do data science.
Yeah. And I was going to add somewhere on more on the technology side, but because that's what I like. But essentially, getting the data to a system where you can actually process it and read it is challenging. Like if you need to just ship, petabytes of data from your environment to the cloud to do operations on it, it's going to be a challenge. Or the other thing I would say is make sure that you have some sort of platform in place to process it. And most likely it's going to be some sort of asynchronous platform. I mean, traditionally I see a lot more synchronous systems in place, but those are the major challenges, I think, is really getting access to it and being able to perform on it, as well as setting up the system, the platform in place around it.
I have never seen an organization be able to successfully do data science without having a modernized digital platform.
Yeah.
Any suggestions on real-time visualization tools on top of big data like Power BI or Tableau, apart from Elasticsearch, Kibana?
That's a great question. Tim, let's tag team on that one too. Yes. So visualization is incredibly important, especially bringing value to the business. I can just tell you that one thing I would say to you is the specific tools, it all depends on the solution you're looking at and the type of data that you have. But one thing I would say, and I want to throw this out there because I think it's really important. Geospatial visualization, extremely important. If you can get geospatial visualization of your data, which is a lot in time series analysis using advanced visualization tools, it will give you insights far beyond what you ever dreamed of within your organization. I have done this. I have ran teams that created this stuff. It is amazing the world that you change, and you can't compete with it. So if you've got geospatial visualization combined with time series analysis visualization, all these advanced tools and stuff like that, it really depends on where your data is coming from. But boy, that stuff is powerful. Go ahead, Tim. You know more about the tech side.
I mean, I was going to say, it's hard to recommend a tool and compare them between each other. Every tool is situational. A lot of it is sometimes it's on licensing and what the company's appetite for skill set for using it is. So I find that by going to different organizations, they all have their set of tools that they like to use on the visualization side. And honestly, my favorite way is actually just to build it ourselves, get the real requirements, not be restricted for a lot of that, and build it into some sort of web interface so that people can actually use it and digest it how they want to digest it, and not be dependent on other teams to generate reports and whatnot.
All right. If banks have data science team and DevOps team set up, how do fintech startups have any value addition?
From
That's it.
me, I think the biggest value add that the fintechs bring, and that I see a lot of traditional banks and infrastructure, is really just the speed to market. I mean,
Yep.
if it takes a more traditional team 3 months or even a month to deploy a chain, I mean the fintechs are probably deploying daily. I mean, they can move on the spot of a dime, whereas so you could be experimenting with a feature, get it so close to production, and then realize that especially if you don't have canary testing, that it was a bad idea. I mean, how do you fail fast in that world? So I don't know if you want to add more color to that, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult question to ask because first of all, in the reality we're in today, traditional banks, I don't care how big they are, they're dealing with this technical debt. This is going to take decades to get rid of this.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not decades, but I mean, a really effective mid-sized company, probably 5 to 6 years to get rid of their technical debt. And then they'll be on a similar playing field. But there's two things that traditional banking has a big advantage over the fintechs in one area: financial power. I mean, that's to dislodge a major money center would be very difficult, because if the fintechs really go to that level, they're going to have to get into all the regulatory requirements that the large money centers and the large regional banks have. And once they get into that area, good luck. Then their competitive advantage goes out the window. But as long as they stick to the ancillary areas that are less regulated, and they bring in this really fast technology, and they bring in this tech and the ability to deliver services quickly that don't require a tremendous amount of regulation, they are here to stay. They are going to have a very successful career, and they are having a very successful career as we speak.
All right. That was it, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Asta.
Thank you. Those were some wonderful insights and questions that we got today. Thank you, everybody, for taking out time and participating in this webinar. And thank you, Tim and Craig, for your enlightening all of us with banking and digital transformation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks, Tim. Hey, I really appreciate you inviting me.
Yep, thanks, Craig, for joining me.
Take care, mate.
Bye.
If anybody has any further questions, please reach out to Tim or marketing@techolution.com, and stay safe. Thank you for coming in today. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.